Hi, Michael. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Barry. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hello to our listeners and viewers and things like this, because we've noticed a growth spurt and we're very pleased. And we would like to hear from you if you have suggestions for sprucing things up. Be kind. Don't make too many wardrobe remarks. But if you have ideas or topics or suggestions about the content of the program, we'd like to hear it. And we're pleased to see a little bit of an uptick in critical media studies. So thank you for being there.
All right. Well,
Oh, and I should introduce. Do you want me to introduce the episode? Why not? Since we're
let's
here,
go for it. Let's live.
why not? Since we're here, well, we're going to talk about in the background and sometimes in the foreground of today's discussion is going to be is Byung Chul Han's 2015, I think, text, "The Burnout Society," which caused a big stir, I think, in media studies circles when it was initially published, when it was published now almost 10 years ago, because time flies. And Han has gone on to become kind of a major figure. He loves writing short books that are meditative. He has a very distinctive philosophical, ruminative writing style, but he's also tries for concision. Like, he writes short books with short chapters in his books.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the form of his meditations and reflections are an important part of his message of the content. McLuhan, we're doing a little McLuhan thing here. The form is the content, and the content is the form. So that's probably an important aspect of his writing that we should remark on. He tries to be concise, and like Walter Benjamin, a fan favorite, according to the stats, according to the algorithm of critical media studies. He has a tendency to be, he writes in a very pleasing style. Even in obviously he has a great attention to language, and he tries to write epigrams and fashion epigrams in a sense. His chapters are full of, the well worded and articulate one-liners that kind of summarize his arguments. That said, okay, now I characterize the form. Let's talk about the content. The Burnout Society is an analysis, and here you can help me out, Michael. Or you'll be helping me out throughout the whole conversation. It's an analysis of the psychological effects of media interaction, kind of broadly speaking. And let me characterize what we're talking about, and then, obviously we can begin this discussion proper. The Burnout Society is an analysis of, I think, mainly an analysis of the psychological impact that media technologies have on users. And so there's an argument that there's a new kind of psychological profile and a new way of organizing society that's coming to be as a result of our interactions with media. That's the general argument of the Burnout Society. And as you can tell from the title, the Burnout Society, there is a tendency, the new subject of Burnout Society is typically overbusy, typically multitasking. And I guess there's a general argument, help me with this. The general argument, or the general assumption of Byung Chul Han's book, is that media has scattered our attentions and left us unable to concentrate on things, and basically reorganize our mental the hardwiring, has interfered with the higher hardwiring of our cognitive reflexes. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a good summary? What did I leave out
No,
of
I
this
don't think you
summary?
left anything out. I'd say that one of the things that struck me coming into this was this is very similar, I think, in sort of its intention to a lot of the pop psychology that you see now
Sure.
about
Sure.
being overstressed, overworked. And it also, in a way, obviously, given his focus on our technological and media immersion, um, I also saw connections to Nicholas Carr's essay. I think it's old now, about is Google making us stupid. I don't recall the
Is it
year.
pre-2015? Is
Oh
it
my
late
God,
2000,
yeah, 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 yeah,
early
yeah,
2000s? Early 2000s?
yeah. And so the idea with Carr, just briefly, was that, you know, our reliance on Google and similar technologies is rewiring the way we're thinking. It's shortening out our
Mm.
attention spans. It's changing the way that we engage with the written word. And I think that obviously the connection for me was the attention span. And what he's doing here, what Han is doing with Burnout Society, I think is a nice and deeper extension of that. But it's also, what I was interested in was, this really in 2015 sort of anticipates a lot of what we saw um, through COVID, and you know, with the spacing of the increased reliance on technology, and sort of how
Mhm,
the
mhm.
fallout from that you're seeing now, in terms of, you know, what people have called the Great Resignation and all the dissatisfaction
Sure.
with life. Uh, it was interesting to me to see this as it predates all that. So his attention was on um, sort of just the excess of stimuli that we have, the information that we have to process. And you and I have decided that we're going to focus on the second section in here, entitled Profound Boredom. And so I don't know, do you want to lead us into the deep end here, or?
Sure, I can leave. Sure.
You can
You
tell
can always trust me.
we script these very carefully.
You can all no, I was just laughing because you can always trust me to take us into the deep end and drown us. I mean, I can definitely do that
I'm
easily.
ready. I'm ready. I got stuff
So
to say about this.
yeah, and I'm glad you did that. 10 minutes in, I should have said this in the first minute. Not only are we talking about Byung Chul Han, but we're kind of cherry picking, and that our reflections today are going to basically focus on his brief discussion of attention and what that says about multitasking and the
Hmm.
multitasking subject. And our reflections, we're not so much going to explicate this section, this brief
No.
chapter, but just sort of use this as an opportunity, and hopefully it will be interesting, hopefully, as a sort of a platform for our speculations and own ruminations about the new attention economy, what Byung Chul Han says about it, and the practice of multitasking, not just in 2015, but even more currently. I was struck by what you said, and I want to say something quickly about it before we turn to Byung Chul Han, about the ways in which, because I think this is inevitable. I think we did this, and I think any reader of Byung Chul Han who comes across this text now, rather than in 2000, rather than before the COVID era, is going to be struck and feel kind of implicated in his description, primarily because of I think it's pretty clear that our collective COVID experience, I was about to say attenuated. It's the opposite word. It concentrated. It kind of made Byung Chul Han's comments on the the hard wiring, our the ways in which our technology has rewired us has become more, I think, more prevalent, more present, more obvious in the post-COVID age. Would you
Hmm.
agree?
Absolutely.
But maybe well, okay, well, I'll say that. Do you have anything you want to say about, maybe the first thing we could talk about is what's the relation between the chapter title and what we're talking about, profound boredom? Is he for it or against it? He's for profound boredom, right? That's the paradox of this chapter.
Yeah, and I think he's mourning the death of
He's mourning
profound
the
boredom,
death of profound
right?
boredom,
Which
right?
sounds like such a phenomenal position to take, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it sounds exciting.
Yeah, so his argument, in brief, is that we've shifted from a disciplinary, um, um, good Lord, um, a disciplinary society to a achievement society.
Let's say briefly for all the non-Foucauldians in the audience, which there are probably none, but
Yes.
let's rehearse for which there are probably none within the hearing or viewing here. But let's say briefly what a disciplinary society means. That was Michel Foucault's term for a social, the new form of social organization that he saw rising in the 19th century, where there was a new premium put on techniques of surveillance, mechanisms in society that left people feeling that they were potentially being watched and monitored and surveilled at all times. And so therefore, accordingly, the disciplinary society works to the discipline in the disciplinary society. It's working because you always, assume you're being watched. And because you assume you're always being watched, you change or modify your behavior to adjust to social norms accordingly. So
Right.
that's how the disciplinary society works. That's an argument that's very, this is how it relates to Han. Han accepts the Foucauldian premise. I think he says, yeah, there was a disciplinary society that emerged in the 19th century, but Byung Chul Han's argument is that we are, throughout the book, right? The Burnout Society is his term for the society that has replaced the disciplinary society. So that's one thing I wanted to mark, because that's one of the important markers. That's one of the important aims of it.
Yes. So we've gone from the disciplinary society to an achievement society is his
Achievement
basic level.
society,
And
right.
so now we are measuring our value and our work. So the disciplinary society works by creating the impression that we are being watched and therefore must
Right.
adhere to certain social standards and norms, right? So I have to do X or Y and I can't do Z because it is societally accepted that this is what should be done versus what shouldn't be done.
Right.
And you are punished if you transgress. The
Foucault's
achievement,
study was discipline and punish. That
right?
was the type, right?
So the achievement society is a shift in that where we feel compelled to achieve in certain ways, and we are rewarded, I guess, in this regard for behaving um,
Manically, for behaving manically and trying to overachieve. And we're defining ourselves by our achievements.
right. And failure in this regard brands you as a loser or as an, yeah. Okay. So the idea is that instead of being punished, we are being rewarded for essentially grinding ourselves down. And his argument is that in this achievement society, we have achievement equals positivity, right? Like you did a good job. And so there's this excess positivity. Really, it's just a culture of excess everywhere. There's positivity, which
excessive information coming in, excessive information.
Yeah. So the positivity, first of all, I think it's interesting because it is, whereas the disciplinary society, the police officer shows up at your door. In the achievement society, the principal shows up at your door and pins a little star on your collar and says, you did a great job.
New discipline,
right. And that's the new discipline, is reward. And so we have these in search of the achievement, we have an excess of everything, an excess of stimulation, an excess of information, an excess of impulses, right? And his argument is that because of all of this excess, we are forced to multitask. And I think what he says somewhere
to achieve, we have to multitask in order to achieve at the right level of productivity, and we have to prove our productivity at all times.
Yes.
So that's why we're always focusing on how to get the damn award.
Right. Right. And so, but his argument, and I think what really clearly stakes his, puts his flag in the ground. He says multitasking does not represent civilizational progress. Such an aptitude amounts to regression. And so I think in terms of answering the question of, well, what is profound boredom? Why is he mourning? What does it mean to mourn the loss of profound boredom? What he's saying is that we are so continually plugged in, right? I mean, there's heavy Steiglerian overtones here. We are so heavily plugged in that we don't have the opportunity to just sit back and, as he calls it, be bored, right? For Steigler, this was noesis, the ability to unplug and remove yourself. And so Han says that essentially multitasking is this is the behavior of animals, of wild animals, who must constantly surveil their surroundings lest they get eaten.
And they're constantly attending at all moments, for that reason, to the stimuli that's always coming in. And that's how we're like. We're always alert to the stimuli coming in. That's what's distracting us in this case. So we can't empty out. And you're right to invoke. So what profound boredom really means for Byung Chul Han, I think you're really, really, really right to equate this with Steigler's description of what does he call it?
Noesis.
Drifting? Noesis, right. But noesis in Steigler is a kind of absence of thought that allows, I mean, this is where it really connects with Byung Chul Han. Steigler's noesis, real thinking, the real thought of noesis, it depends on a kind of prior evacuation or absence of ideas and reflection. Thinking, noesis occurs, you build on that, on the foundation, not of other noetic moments, but out of in dreaming states, in non-reflective states. And that's why sleeping and dreaming and daydreaming is so important for noesis, in my understanding of what Steigler is saying. Now, that's exactly what, I think that's exactly why you touch on exactly why Byung Chul Han reminds us of Steigler, or seems to be calling out, embodying or representing Steiglerian take on thinking, on true creative thinking. So profound boredom is it's the equivalent to daydreaming, right? When you're in a state of profound boredom, you are, in a sense, vacant of thought. And we're led to fear these moments where we're not thinking, when we're not thinking productively. But
and that's it, though. It's because it's not, I didn't mean to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's because it is not productive. And
exactly.
Productive, right. I think, in the sense, this is, I'm going to betray my inner Marxist here, right? Because it doesn't produce something tangible.
Sure. Absolutely.
So this is the argument, and my God, you see this everywhere now, right? Like what's the value of the liberal arts, Barry? Nothing, because it doesn't make anything. You and your damn poetry can just go off into the wood in your Birkenstocks and have a nice day. You're not doing anything.
We can't even, but that's important. Let me add one more thing to that. Why is it valueless? Because we can't see what it's producing. It's not that it's producing nothing. It may be producing nothing. But the other thing is, whatever it's producing, we can't see it immediately. Because we can't see it, we can't respond to it, and we can't value it. We can't recognize it.
And that's it right there, right? Like you can't value it. What I think is interesting as well, I'm curious for your take on this, and I think this is very much in the same vein, is he argues that in lieu of this daydreaming, this noetic moment, this profound boredom, what we have instead, and this is an offshoot of multitasking, is what he calls hyperattention, right?
Sure.
And so it's not that we're not, the idea, the sort of the grinder's mentality here is that you have to work hard, right? And the problem that we have in the new attention economy is that we have too many things. And so with hyperattention, it's not that we're not working hard. It's not that we're not focusing on something. It's that we're focusing very deeply on many things at once.
On a range of things. That's really crucial.
And so the question I guess I would have is, how does that even work? Like, so Han is basically arguing that we've got this pool of attention that we are investing heavily, but instead of focusing on one thing, we're focusing on a multitude of things. And so,
I think what, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's it. The question is, so what?
Well, I think I have. I think I can sort of mimic, come up with a fair imitation of what Byung Chul Han may say about that. Why I think he feels that's dangerous is that there is assumption that profound boredom. Okay, two things. Number one, the basic argument of the chapter, as I understand it, is that in losing profound boredom, we're not losing something that is negative. We're actually losing the necessary, and this is where it dovetails, as you were saying with Steigler. In losing profound boredom, well, we think that's a good thing, but what we're really losing, according to Byung Chul Han, what we're really losing is the necessary prerequisite for true creative thinking, for true creative production. Because true creative noesis, to use Steigler's term, as you did rightly, to really achieve noesis, you have to have a prior state of sustained, not just productive boredom, but, and this is the answer to your other, to the more direct question you just asked. You have, not only is productive, profound boredom necessary as a preliminary to true creative, to noesis, and to true creative production, it's a sustained, you don't just need a little of it, you need a whole hell of a lot of it. You need a sustained case and a sustained immersion of some temporal duration, of immersion in this state of profound boredom. That's the necessary preliminary to noesis and creative thinking and creative production. So that I think is Byung Chul's answer to what's the difference between, I mean, you're right to point out that we're still focusing attention. We still have an ability to concentrate and to attend to things. It's just that we're scattering it. But for Byung Chul Han, that's not enough. You have to have a delayed, a temporal immersion within profound boredom that is of some duration, some sustained amount of time. And it has to be a single thing.
Okay, so I'm just going to play devil's advocate here because I'm curious about this.
Yes.
Is the question then, the argument against boredom, okay, that it simply isn't efficient enough, like in this new attention economy, right?
No.
So my thinking,
I think,
is
go
that
ahead.
the problem, as I understand it, would, like, if I'm going to be like, if I'm sitting across the table from Byung Chul Han, right?
Yeah, okay.
And
I wanted to say, I wanted you to clarify your question, because you're saying the problem. You're not asking about the problem for me or for you. You're asking, is the problem with his argument?
Yeah.
Right?
So the question, so let's be, just to be clear here, right? I think he's got a lot of interesting ideas, and I'm not trying to play devil's advocate to pick holes in his argument so much as I am. I think it's an interesting way of looking at what he's doing here. Han is bemoaning the death of profound boredom, right? The argument here is that we have too much of everything, and that we're forced to attend to everything. Do we have too much of everything because the process required for noesis, or the process for profound boredom to yield fruit, is just too slow? Is it inefficient?
Oh yeah, I think he is saying that. That's why we're targeting it. Yes.
Yeah. So like, because now this is going to be Mike's blast from the past episode, right? Because as we're talking, so I've gotten Steigler in. We got Foucault in. So
please say McLuhan. Please say
no. Let's invite our dear friend Jauques Eleul back into the discussion, right? This idea, but his whole notion of his whole idea about technique, right? About things always moving to the most efficient means possible. Okay. And so I'm wondering if perhaps this new economy of attention, this shift away from disciplinary society, right? So like, a lot of research has, so I read a lot about sort of human performance. Okay. And one of the things that's interesting is that the old school method of yelling and screaming and throwing chairs, it turns out, isn't nearly as productive as an encouraging, sort of welcoming, work-life environment, right? Like the more comfortable you are, the more you'll produce,
The more you produce, yeah.
right? So with that in mind, we've moved away perhaps from the disciplinary society more to an achievement society. You can feel good about yourself, right? The problem with the achievement society is it seems to be that, oh my God, it's creating this fractured approach to everything. And, I personally feel that it's not good. I think that we need unplugged time, downtime. In my own personal life, when I put the phone away and I take my digital toys and put them away and just spend time with my dog, with my kids, outside, whatever it is, I feel better. I feel more creative. So I have a personal bias towards Han. I think he's right. Okay. But at the same time, I think that there's the possibility that we tend to react negatively to things that we're not comfortable with. We tend to react with skepticism to the new. So, for example, all the new AI and the Chat GPT, and oh my God, it's going to kill education. Maybe, but maybe not. And so, we look at this, oh my God, the death of creativity, the death of boredom. I'm wondering if, just to play devil's advocate here, maybe that's not the problem. Maybe this, sort of always on, deep attention to multiple stimuli isn't simply a
Bad.
step in the name of Elul's technique. Are we going to move to something more efficient?
2 comments on that.
Yeah. I'm thinking out loud, by the way. I'm not trying to push a particular
No.
agenda here.
Isn't that what we're trying to do here? That's what we're trying to do. No, that was a fair move. In other words, I'm saying that's a fair move.
Okay.
Did it destroy the microphone in the process of? I didn't. Did that get up on camera?
Oh,
Did
absolutely.
you hear anything? Okay, perfect.
Barry's falling apart here as
all
we
right,
go.
all right, okay. So 2 things. I don't think Byung Chul Han would disagree with you that that the destruction of, or the elimination or diminishing of profound boredom is a step toward a more efficient society or to greater efficiency on the part of subjects. What he's doing is, however, is questioning whether or not efficiency is a value, as Elul did too, right? And the reason why Elul was talking about the culture of efficiency, or rather the culture of technique and its prime virtue of efficiency, he was describing something, but he was also criticizing that as a human ideal. And I think Byung Chul Han is doing that. If you allow me, I have 2 points on this. So the first point is, yes, I agree with you. If there is a way, it's certainly positive in the sense that if you believe the current culture of technology needs to be enhanced, getting rid of profound boredom and getting people used to the elimination of profound boredom would be a positive step. The question is whether or not that notion of efficiency, whether anything, including profound boredom, needs to be sacrificed to that ideal of efficiency. So it sounds like I'm countering your question here with point 1, but I'm going to return to your question in a different way in my second point. I think I sense behind your question is a kind of impatience with the way in which Byung Chul Han argues. There's a Vedic, prophetic quality to his writing, and a kind of assumption that we all agree on core human values. And you're kind of pushing on his assessment, on his method, on his way. I think what you're taking issue with is not so much the content point, but actually the form of his writing, because he solicits our agreement on fundamental human values in order for this text to work, we all have to agree on what's good and what's bad. And maybe we don't necessarily agree on what's good and what's bad. And now just final word on this in relation to the second point. And we talked about this off camera, off the record. But my feeling, I'm not going to speak for you, but you can chime in. My feeling in rereading Byung Chul Han, I guess I hadn't read fully this text before, but so it was a partial reread on my count. I find myself bored with Byung Chul Han. I find myself more and more bored with his critiques of the end of profound boredom. And I'm trying to think, why am I so bored with him when I fundamentally agree with him on so many points? And I'm trying to find the source of my boredom with him. And I think one of the reasons I'm bored with him is that I feel that fundamentally he is asking me to change my life, and all of us to change our lives. And I'm willing to do that. I'm happy to do that. But I think there is a dissatisfaction with him to the extent that I feel he thinks that changing our relation to our habitat, he seems, I don't know, and maybe I'm projecting onto Byung Chul Han, but I feel he thinks it's kind of easy that if we come up with this, if we become this pure ethical subject, this pure virtuous subject, then we can resist our habitat. And I'm thinking, how far does that argument work? Last point, multitasking. How the hell do you have anything like resembling a job, let alone a creative job, let alone a teaching job in 21st century capitalist economy without having to multitask every day? So a philosopher telling me, got to stop multitasking, you got to start daydreaming. I agree with him in principle, but how the heck to actualize that?
Well, and I think that's the frustration. I mean, I, like you, like what he's saying. And I think, like you, I want to embrace what he's saying. But my problem or my frustration with this is that, and I have this frustration with a lot of things. This is not unique to Han.
A lot of things in media studies, or a lot of things in pop psychology.
Just the stuff that happens between getting up in the morning and going to
bed
at night.
You mean daily existence?
In terms of in terms of sort of trying to find solutions to problems, be they academic, be they philosophical, or be they much more mundane and banal, right? And the problem is that space between the ideal and the pragmatic, right? So I feel like Han, and rightfully so from his perspective, if you're going to sit there and you're going to say, look, I think this is the best thing for people to do, then that's the ideal, right? So I don't fault him for that. But I think, like you, there's I feel a sense of frustration because it simply isn't feasible in action. In terms of praxis, this is not how things work, right? Like right now, in talking to you and recording this, I am necessarily not grading a stack of papers that is calling for me. Okay. Right. And when I get to those papers, I am going to be grading them mindful of the clock on the wall that says I have to be somewhere else at a different time. There is always a stretch or a pressure on something. So even if you can devote your time in a focused manner to a single endeavor, you are still necessarily going to be pulled just because life is busy. And, we don't have...
insists that profound boredom, just to insert this, and I want you're on a roll. I don't want to interrupt you. I just want to insert one thing here. It connects back to what he was saying, what Byung Chul Han was saying about profound boredom. It's valuable only if you linger with it over a span of time. And that's precisely what we don't have time to do. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And so that's it. I mean, I like it. I want to embrace it, but I find it frustrating, I think will be the word I'll go with, because I just don't see how it's actionable.
Well, Michael, in our final moments here, how about we both do this? And I guess we should tag this, or I'll flag this, that we'd like to return to a related topic, to this topic of attention, and think about it in different ways, in various ways in another episode. So this will be there, expect a loose return and follow up to Byung Chul Han. But again, we're going to use Han's book not so much as a text for study and close explication, but as a springboard to discuss other ideas, in particular to focus on the meaning of attention in the Burnout Society, or the function of attention in the Burnout Society. Okay. But maybe this is a good place for us to give, okay, we both try to describe what Byung Chul Han is doing. And we both said, I think, positive things. I think your comparison with, now, thinking about the Repici mental universe, the world of your mind, I would think that the comparison you make between Steigler and Eleul and Byung Chul Han, that constitutes high praise and high esteem in the Repici universe.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yet we're both talking about, we both just voice our, I don't know, frustration. I think you use that word, and that's the best word to use. Our frustrations in reading this text. So with that in mind, maybe I can ask you first, and then I'll see if I can think of something. Like, okay, given all this, given our ambiguous feelings about the text, what do we have to say about Han? Do we have a takeaway?
I think that he's right to identify some of the things that are at the core of, the modern day malaise, dissatisfaction. I mean, I think that this sense of being stretched in a million directions, not having ready access to boredom. And I see that term sits uneasily with me, but not having access to, not having the opportunity to unplug, always having to have your attention occupied in some manner. I think he's right to connect the dots and follow that down the line and to say, look, this is an unhealthy and unsustainable, a suboptimal way of being. I think that's right. I think that the conclusion, or what I understand his conclusion to be, to say, well, stop, is problematic.
Quit it. Just quit it.
Stop it. Like the answer to me can't be take a nap. And that's sort of what it feels like. But again, I don't know that all problems get answers. And that's sort of one of the problems that we have, is that he has rightfully identified a significant problem.
Yeah, that's a deep point.
And I think there's a pressure to provide an answer, and I don't know that we have one. Or certainly I don't know that
that's a great point, Michael. Man, that's a great takeaway. When you were talking about, I'll give my brief takeaway, because I didn't have one until you started talking, but you gave me a very good one, a surprising takeaway. I realize, so the outcome, my takeaway from our discussion, not just from reading Byung Chul Han, but from our discussion of Byung Chul Han, I think I took something from your comparison between Byung Chul Han's notion of boredom and the creative function of profound boredom, and your comparison of Han in this particular thought experiment with Bernard Steigler. And I've come to the conclusion that I share your queasiness or concern about using the term boredom. I think I much prefer Steigler's characterization of
noesis,
as having a foundation of non-reflective thought, dream thought. I think calling it boredom gets it kind of wrong. I think Steigler's description of daydreaming and waking states of, daydreaming and dreaming as being the necessary foundation for noesis, for kinds of I would rather call it non-productive thinking than call it boredom.
But that's problematic, because
why so?
The long term, it is productive. It's productive of creativity.
But you calling it boredom, I guess it doesn't sit well with me.
No, and I agree with you. I think, but the problems we risk sort of devolving into semantics here, because there
Uh-huh.
is no and it speaks to, it's interesting because I think it speaks to the dominant perspective here. We
Uh-huh.
balk at calling it boredom, I think, because there are very not tangible, there's very palpable negative
Yeah.
overtones to it.
And
But
that's what I'm reacting to. So I'm reacting on behalf of the Burnout Society,
yes,
right?
but at the
My
same
value.
time,
Yeah, I
you
agree.
can't
I agree.
call it unproductive because philosophically that's inaccurate, but that's what we want it to be, because we don't want it to be a part
Okay.
of this.
So we're in a philosophical quandary, which means we need to get the hell out of this mess
Run away.
as soon as possible. Hey, listeners, viewers, friends, and enemies, tell us you like us. Subscribe, share. Like, subscribe, share if you like this at all. And also give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you.
Barry, thank you for going on this philosophical journey with me, for leading the way.
Thank you, Michael. Productive as usual.
We'll
Thank
pick
you.
this up next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.